ever feel like you're stuck in a rut, like society has these invisible walls boxing you in?
Hmm.
Today's deep dive takes us into the world of George Eliot's Middlemarch,
Okay.
a book that tackles this feeling head on, even though it was written over a century ago.
Uh-huh.
And we're not just talking about a dusty old classic here, right?
Right.
We're talking about a book that unpacks timeless human struggles,
Hmm.
ambition, societal pressure, the longing for love and fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
And get this,
Yeah.
it does it through these incredibly vivid characters who are trying to find their way in a world that's on the verge of huge change.
Wow.
Expert speaker, for our listener who might be new to Middlemarch, can you set the stage a bit?
Sure.
Who is George Eliot, and what's the big deal about this book?
Well, George Eliot, pen name for the brilliant Mary Ann Evans, was way ahead of her time.
Okay.
Writing in the 1870s, she tackled these huge universal themes in a way that still feels incredibly relevant today. And Middlemarch,
Yeah.
it's like she put a whole town under a microscope, revealing all the juicy complexities of human nature.
Juicy complexities, I like it. So we're dropped into this seemingly ordinary town in England, Middlemarch, in the years leading up to the Reform Act of 1832.
Right.
Big social changes are brewing.
Yeah,
But at the heart of it all are these personal stories.
of course.
And no story is more captivating than Dorothea Brooks. Here's this young woman, intelligent, passionate, and she's got money, which, let's be real, was pretty much the only power a woman could have back then.
Yeah.
But Dorothea isn't content with just being rich.
Right.
She wants to make a difference.
Absolutely.
Right.
Dorothea embodies this yearning for a life of purpose, something I think a lot of us can relate to even now. But for a woman in her era, the options were incredibly limited.
Right.
She could get married, which was expected,
Yeah.
or she could live a life confined to charitable works, which didn't really satisfy her intellectual hunger.
So she thinks she's found her intellectual match in Casaubon, this older scholar who's obsessed with his research.
Yeah.
But, oh, talk about a bad romance novel waiting to happen.
It's easy to judge Dorothea's choice, but Eliot is so clever in showing us how societal pressures can lead us to make choices that, that seem right in theory but are disastrous in reality.
Because on the surface, it makes some sense. Dorothea is deeply religious, intellectually curious, and she sees in Casaubon this path to knowledge, to something bigger than herself.
Exactly. But what Eliot reveals so brilliantly is the gulf between intellectual attraction and actual lived compatibility.
Yes.
Casaubon, for all his learning, is dry, emotionally unavailable, the human equivalent of a dusty old book.
And Dorothea is basically stuck in a gilded cage. Her marriage becomes a powerful symbol of the limitations placed on women, even wealthy, intelligent ones. But okay, it's not just the women in Middlemarch who are grappling with these expectations. We also meet Tertius Lydgate, this ambitious young doctor who glows into town ready to revolutionize medicine.
Lydgate is fascinating because he represents the clash between idealism and reality. He's a man of science. He wants to bring modern medicine to Middlemarch, but he's also very aware of social standing.
Right.
And that's where Rosamund Vincy enters the picture.
Rosamund.
Yeah.
The beautiful, delicate flower who also happens to be a master of manipulation.
That's a great way to put it. Rosamund embodies a different kind of societal pressure. She's been raised to value appearances, social status, and material comfort above all else. And she's not afraid to use her charm to get what she wants.
Which, of course, spells trouble for Lydgate, who's more interested in, actually feeling people than climbing the social ladder.
Exactly. And their marriage becomes this microcosm of how our values, the things we prioritize in life, can either make or break a relationship.
Yeah.
Lydgate values his work, his desire to make a real difference in people's lives.
Right.
Rosamund values the appearance of success.
Yes.
The social standing that comes with being married to a prominent doctor.
And she's got this incredible talent for twisting everything to her own advantage. Like that whole situation with Lydgate getting involved in local politics.
Ah, yes. The election for the chaplain at the new hospital. Here's where we see another layer of Middlemarch's social web come into play.
Right.
And another character driven by a very different kind of ambition, Mr. Bulstrode.
Bulstrode.
Yeah.
The banker who practically oozes piety and respectability. Except we know there's something darker lurking beneath that facade.
Eliot is brilliant at using characters like Bulstrode to expose the hypocrisy at the heart of Victorian society. Outwardly, Bulstrode is a pillar of the community, a devout Christian, a philanthropist. But as the story unfolds, we learn he has a past. A
Yes.
very shady past that he's gone to great lengths to bury.
And that shady past comes back to haunt him in the form of Raffles.
Oh,
This,
Raffles.
shall we say, colorful character who knows a little too much about Bulstrode's history.
Raffles becomes a kind of walking, talking symbol of Bulstrode's guilt, a constant reminder that the past can't stay buried forever.
It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck. You know it's all going to come crashing down, but you can't look away.
And as Bulstrode tries to maintain his grip on power, his true nature starts to unravel. He becomes increasingly isolated, his actions more and more desperate.
But it's not just Bulstrode who's hiding something. Dorothea stumbles upon a secret.
Oh.
And this one has huge implications for Will Ladislaw.
This is where Eliot shows us just how interconnected these seemingly separate lives really are. Dorothea discovers that Bulstrode has committed a huge injustice against Will's family,
Wow.
essentially cheating Will out of his inheritance.
Talk about a tangled web. And here's where my heart really starts to break for Dorothea. She's surrounded by these men who are all, in their own ways, driven by ambition, by the desire for power or status. Casaubon, with his all-consuming research, Bulstrode with his social standing, even Lydgate to some extent, with his desire for professional recognition.
And yet, Dorothea sees through those facades. She recognizes the good in Lydgate, even as his ambitions falter, and she sees the potential in Will, his genuine desire to make a difference in the world.
Okay, but let's talk about Will for a second. He's not just some romantic hero. He's got his own flaws, his own impulsive streak, like that whole thing where he gets caught up in a brawl at a political rally.
That's a great example of how Eliot gives us these well-rounded characters. Will is passionate, idealistic, but he's also prone to acting without thinking, which gets him into trouble. It's a very different kind of idealism than Lydgate's, who's much more cautious, more willing to work within the system.
And both of them get burned by the realities of Middlemarch, but in very different ways.
Exactly. Lydgate's downfall is a slow burn.
Yeah.
He makes choices, partly influenced by Rosamond, that compromise his ideals, leaving him professionally and financially vulnerable. And then the scandal with Bulstrode explodes, and Lydgate gets caught in the crossfire.
Which is so tragic, because he didn't do anything wrong, really. He just got caught up in this mess that wasn't of his making.
That's the point, isn't it? Life isn't always fair. Sometimes good people get caught in bad situations, and their reputations are tarnished through no fault of their own.
And it makes you realize that reputation, how others see us, can be so fragile, especially in a place like Middlemarch, where gossip spreads faster than wildfire.
That's a key element of Eliot's genius as a writer, you know? She captures how social pressures can shape individual destinies. It's like the town of Middlemarch itself becomes a character with its own set of rules and expectations.
But Eliot doesn't just leave us in despair. Even though characters like Lydgate and Bulstrode suffer these huge falls from grace, there are glimmers of hope, right?
Absolutely. Take Dorothea, for instance.
Yeah.
She's surrounded by these men who represent different facets of ambition and power, but she ultimately chooses a different path.
Because after Casaubon dies, she could easily marry someone else with status and money.
But instead chooses Will Ladislaw, and it's a radical act for a woman of her time.
He's younger, not as wealthy, and his ambition lies in social reform, not climbing the traditional ladders of success. It's like Dorothea recognizes that true fulfillment comes from aligning yourself with shared values, with a deeper purpose.
Precisely. And their marriage, unconventional as it is, offers this message of hope. It suggests that personal happiness can be found, even amidst the constraints of society, when we prioritize love and shared ideals.
It's definitely not your typical fairy tale ending, but it feels earned.
Right. Exactly. And what's interesting is that Eliot gives us a counterpoint to Dorothea and Will's grand, unconventional love story with Fred Vincy and Mary Garth.
Ah, Fred and Mary. Now they represent a different kind of happiness, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Fred, who starts off as this somewhat hapless character prone to get-rich-quick schemes, finally finds his footing through hard work and commitment.
He ends up working with Caleb Garth, Mary's father, a man who embodies quiet integrity and practical skills. It's like Fred finally realizes that true satisfaction comes from honest effort and genuine connection.
And his marriage to Mary reflects that. It's not about social climbing or grand ambitions, but about finding joy in the ordinary, in building a life together based on mutual respect and love.
So we have these different models of fulfillment playing out in Middlemarch. But if there's one takeaway that really sticks with me, it's this idea that even in a world seemingly bound by tradition and social expectations, individuals still have agency. They have the power to make choices that ripple outward, affecting not only their own lives, but the lives of those around them.
That's a brilliant insight, and it's what makes Middlemarch so relevant even today.
Yeah.
It reminds us that our choices matter, that we have a responsibility to act with intention, to consider the consequences of our actions, both big and small.
Because even the smallest choices can have these unintended consequences, right? Like a pebble tossed into a pond, creating ripples that spread far and wide.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of Eliot's storytelling. She reveals those ripple effects, showing us how interconnected our lives truly are.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Middlemarch, what would you say to our listener who's maybe thinking, okay, this all sounds very profound, but why should I care about a bunch of characters from 19th century England?
Here's why. Middlemarch is a mirror reflecting timeless human truths. It's about the complexities of love and ambition, the struggle for meaning and purpose, the interplay of individual choices and societal pressures. These are themes that resonate just as deeply today as they did over a century ago.
So if you're looking for a book that will make you think, make you feel, and maybe even make you see the world a little differently, pick up Middlemarch. You won't regret it.
And keep this in mind as you delve into Eliot's world. Pay attention to the seemingly insignificant moments, the small choices characters make. They often reveal more than the grand pronouncements or dramatic events.
Because it's in those quiet, seemingly ordinary moments that we often discover the most profound truths about ourselves and the world around us. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into George Eliot's Middlemarch. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into a world of knowledge and insightful conversation.